Dust chokes the air in an Oregon outpost in 1869, where the sting of pine sap and tobacco bites the lungs. On a rickety stage of nailed-together crates, My Lin stands with a burlap sack tied tight over her face. Her breath, quick and ragged, betrays a fear she refuses to show. Her dress, thin as a whisper, clings to her curves, damp with sweat and outlining the swell of her hips. A single bead of moisture traces the soft dip of her throat before vanishing beneath the frayed hem of the sack. The crowd of men watches, their eyes hard and hungry. Which one jeers, spitting a stream of tobacco juice that splatters in the dirt. $2 for a corpse, another laughs, their voices a raw tide of lust, scorn, and filthy greed. Then, the crunch of boots cuts through the mob. Flint Brody, his broad shoulders straining the fabric of his worn duster, steps forward. His face is shadowed by a black hat, and his hands, rough from years of working the land and mending fences, flex with purpose. $2, he says, his voice low like a blade cutting the wind. The auctioneer blinks, caught off guard. You ain't seen her face, mister. Flint's gaze locks on My Lin, her body still but alive, trembling under his stare. I'm marrying a woman, not a face, he says, each word heavy and final. A silence falls, sharp as a drawn gun. My Lin, she whispers, her voice soft yet familiar, stirring a distant memory in Flint. A snowbound cave, the warm glow of a fire, a woman who saved him. His pulse races as desire and danger coil tightly within him. Has he just bound himself to a ghost from his past? Flint Brody leads My Lin through a dusty trail where crushed pine needles scent the air. The forest folds around them, muffling the cruel laughter of the outpost. Her hands, bound by frayed twine, clutch the rope. The burlap sack is tied loosely at her neck now, its thin weave shifting with each breath, revealing fleeting glimpses of her chin and her lips, which are trembling but firm. The sack's ragged hem lets her steal glances at the ground, her bare feet stepping sure and steady despite the shadow over her face. Her faded dress, clinging to her form, traces the curve of her hips as they sway with each step, pulling Flint's gaze before he snaps his eyes back to the path, his jaw tight. The old mule plods behind them, its packs of flour and salt rattling softly. The homestead rises ahead, its dark pine walls braced against a rocky rise. A rusted horseshoe is nailed above the door frame. Flint pushes the door open on hinges that groan like a buried secret. You stand where you choose, he says, his voice as rough as split timber. No one's placing you now. My Lin steps inside slowly. Her fingers graze the smooth wooden floor as she crouches by the far wall, drawing her knees up to her chest as the sack flutters faintly with her breath. Flint moves to the stove, the clank of iron filling the quiet room. Water begins to simmer, and the air warms with the scent of smoked meat and a faint bite of cinnamon. He sets a wooden bowl near her, steam curling upward, and steps back to give her space. He doesn't ask, doesn't push, just watches the steady glow of the fire. My Lin's breathing steadies, her fingers loosening their grip on the twine. She lifts the frayed edge of the sack just enough to see the bowl, her movements practiced, as if she has learned to live half-hidden. What's this? She asks, her voice soft but clear through the thin burlap. Flint stirs his own bowl, his eyes tracing the grain of the wooden table. Meal for the last one standing, he says. Cooked it after long days on the range. Always set 2 bowls, even when no one came. My Lin tilts her head, the sack shifting. A lock of dark hair slips free, brushing the soft curve of her jaw, kissed by the firelight. Why 2? She asks, a whisper that cuts deep. Flint's grip tightens on his spoon, his knuckles whitening. For my wife, he says, his voice low and cracked. After the war. For coming home alive. Now or for you. A sound escapes her, sharp and quick, almost a laugh that is swallowed just as fast. She lifts the sack's hem higher, her slender fingers guiding the spoon beneath it. Each bite is slow, deliberate, as if she is tasting trust itself. Flint keeps his eyes on the fire, but her presence fills the room, heavy and alive. That snowbound cave lingers in his mind, her voice, her hands, the fire she kept burning. He wants to ask if it's her, if she's the one who saved him, but the words catch in his throat. She's a stranger bought for $2, yet her voice hums like a song he's carried for years. Outside, the river murmurs and the forest is still. My Lin sets the bowl down, her hands folding tight as the sack settles back over her face. "You don't know me," she says, her voice sharp now, a wall rising between them. Flint leans forward, his elbows on his knees, the firelight carving shadows across his face. "Don't need to," he says, his voice steady. "Not yet." But her breath hitches with an unspoken fear, her body curling tighter, the sack a shield against his gaze. Flint's chest aches with a pull he hasn't felt since his wife's laughter warmed these walls. He stands and steps out into the night, the cold biting at his skin. The stars burn bright and unyielding. He is bound to her now, a woman whose voice stirs ghosts. But what shadows does she carry? And why does his heart, sworn to another, stir for her? Spring weaves through the Oregon pines, and wildflowers spike the air with a faint sweetness. My Lin moves with a quiet grace now, her steps sure on the earth. The burlap sack remains tied loosely at her neck, its thin weave shifting with each breath and its frayed hem letting her steal glances at her work. She sits beside Flint Brody, her hands deft as she guides a needle through his torn shirt, stitching by feel. Her fingers are scarred but steady, and her arms flex smoothly under the sun's heat as a bead of sweat traces the curve of her wrist. Flint mends a split rail fence, each strike of the hammer a fight to bury the heat her nearness stirs. His vow to his late wife chains him, a promise carved in loss, but My Lin's presence burns with a hunger he can't shake. One evening, as storm clouds bruise the sky, the air grows thick with the promise of rain. Flint finds My Lin by the river fetching water. Her fingers nimbly loosen the sacks not to see the bucket's edge. She hums "Oh, Shenandoah," the melody low and haunting, slipping through the burlap's weave and cutting Flint like a blade, dragging him back to that snowbound cave where a voice just like hers kept him alive. She bends to dip the bucket, and her dress pulls tight, the fabric outlining the full, heavy curve of her breasts as she leans low. A raw ache stirs in Flint's gut. He clenches his fists, his breath shallow, fighting the urge to look, to want. She turns, sensing him, and the bucket slips. Water splashes out, soaking her dress. The cotton clings to her thighs, the pale fabric glistening in the fading light, each curve a taunt to his restraint. Her breath quickens, the sack fluttering to reveal the soft line of her jaw, her lips parted and trembling. "My Lin," he rasps, his voice thick, a growl of need he can't hide. She freezes, her fingers tightening on the bucket handle, her knuckles pale. The river hums, the only sound between them. Flint steps closer, his boot sinking into the mud, his pulse hammering like a wild thing caged too long. He has been alone for years, and her body, those thighs, those breasts, pulls at him, raw and unyielding. His hand lifts, trembling, and brushes the sack's edge, grazing the warm skin of her neck. Her pulse races under his calloused fingers. She gasps, a soft sound that sends fire through his veins. He leans in, close enough to smell the pine and river on her skin. Her breath is hot and ragged. Her head tilts, the sack slipping higher, her lips inches from his, full and parted, begging to be tasted. Flint's hand moves boldly now, sliding down her shoulder, his fingers grazing the damp cotton, tracing the swell of her breast. He stops just shy of slipping beneath, as her chest heaves, pressing against his touch. Her body arches in a silent plea. He growls low, wanting to rip the sack away, to see her, to claim her. But the vow to his wife screams in his skull. He pulls her closer, their bodies brushing, his thigh pressing firm and warm against hers. The friction is electric. Her hands grip his duster, fingers digging in, her breath a shudder against his jaw. He tilts her chin, his lips hovering over hers, so close he can feel their heat, taste her air. The world shrinks to the pull between them, a bowstring stretched to breaking. A sharp crack splits the night, a branch snapping in the pines, too close, too deliberate. Flint jerks back, his hand dropping, desire curdling to ice. My Lin stumbles, tugging the sack down, her breath jagged. The moment is shattered. The forest stills, the river's song drowned by distant hoofbeats. Flint's hand finds the knife at his belt as his eyes scan the trees. Someone's out there, he says, his voice hard and low. My Lin grips the bucket, her body tensed, the sack snapped back into place like a shield against the world. The hoofbeats grow louder. A shadow breaks through the pines, and Gideon Slade, a bounty hunter, steps into view. His duster is torn, his eyes as sharp as a blade. He looks like he's looking for work. "Brody," he says, but his gaze rakes over my Lin, lingering on the damp dress and the hidden face. "Heard you got a new wife." Flint steps between them, his stance wide, shielding her. "Ain't your concern," he growls, each word a bullet. Gideon smirks, his fingers brushing the butt of his pistol. "Might be," he says, his voice smooth and venomous. Talk's going round about a girl with a scar, running from blood. My Lin's hand grazes Flint's arm, trembling, a fleeting anchor. The air crackles as storm clouds roll closer. Gideon turns, melting back into the trees, but his words tighten around them like a noose. Flint looks at my Lin, her form rigid under the sack, and feels her secrets clawing to be free. What blood stains her past? And can he stand against a man like Slade when his own heart is already breaking? The forest hums with danger, the river's song drowned by the echo of Gideon Slade's hoofbeats. Flint Brody stands rigid, his hand resting on his knife. Behind him, my Lin's breath comes in sharp bursts through the burlap sack. Its thin weave flutters, tied loosely at her neck to let her see the ground. Her fingers grip his arm, trembling but firm, the damp cotton of her dress still clinging to her thighs. Gideon's words, "a girl with a scar, running from blood," hang heavy in the air, a noose tightening around them both. Flint's eyes scan the pines, his heart pounding, torn between the vow to his late wife and the woman he is now bound to. My Lin tugs the sack's hem, adjusting it with practiced ease, her gaze darting through the frayed edge, alert and alive. "Back to the homestead," Flint says, his voice low and urgent. He pulls her along the trail, where narrowing branches claw at their clothes. My Lin keeps pace, her steps quick, the sack shifting as she ducks under a low bough. Her waist bends, the curve of her back smooth and taut under the thin dress, a fleeting silhouette that stirs Flint's blood despite the danger. He curses himself, the ache for her feels like a betrayal of his oath. They reach the homestead and slam the door shut, but the air inside feels wrong, too still. Flint bars the door with swift hands, then turns to my Lin. "Tell me," he says, his voice hard. "What's he chasing you for?" My Lin hesitates, her fingers tightening on the sack's knot. "I killed a man," she says, her voice steady but low, muffled through the burlap's weave. "Back in Missouri. He attacked me, tore my face. I fought back. I didn't mean to end him," her words spill out, raw and real, a confession she has carried for too long. Flint's jaw tightens. His mind flashes to the cave, to the gentle hands that saved him, not hands that could kill. "You're no murderer," he says, but doubt flickers. Can he trust her? A heavy thud shakes the cabin door. Flint grabs his rifle, shoving my Lin behind him. "Stay low," he growls. The door splinters as Gideon Slade kicks it open, his pistol drawn, his eyes gleaming with hunger. "Time's up, Brody," he says, stepping inside, his boots grinding dust into the floor. "Hand her over, or I burn this place down." My Lin's breath catches. Her hand brushes Flint's back, a touch that steadies him. He raises the rifle, his aim steady, but Gideon is faster. His pistol cracks, and a bullet grazes Flint's arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. My Lin gasps and lunges forward, her hands fumbling to tear a strip from her dress, pressing it to his wound, her fingers trembling but sure. Flint shoves her back and fires at Gideon, the shot splintering the wall. Gideon ducks, laughing with a predator's grin. "She's worth more dead," he taunts, aiming again. My Lin moves quick, grabbing a fire iron from the hearth. She swings it hard, the iron grazing Gideon's shoulder and forcing him back. "Run!" Flint shouts, but she stands firm. The sack slips, revealing her scar, a jagged line across her cheek, raw and defiant. Gideon freezes, recognition flashing in his eyes. "You," he snarls, stepping closer. I knew your face. Flint tackles Gideon, and the two men crash to the floor, a flurry of fists and flying blood. My Lin scrambles for the rifle, her hand shaking as she adjusts the sack to see through its hem. She aims but hesitates, her breath ragged. Flint pins Gideon, his knife at the man's throat, but Gideon laughs, a low, vicious sound. Ask her about the man she killed, he says, his voice dripping with venom. He was my brother. The words hit like a bullet. My Lin's hands drop the rifle, her body trembling. Flint freezes, his knife still poised, his eyes darting to My Lin. Her scar, now bare, tells a story he doesn't know. Did she lie? Is she the killer Gideon claims she is, or the woman who saved him in the snow? The cabin grows still, the truth hanging like smoke, ready to choke them all. The cabin air chokes with dust and blood. Gideon Slade lies pinned beneath Flint Brodis' knife, his words, my brother, still burning in the air. My Lin stands frozen, the burlap sack hanging loose at her neck. Its thin weave has slipped, her scar bared, a jagged truth across her cheek. Her breath shakes, her eyes glinting through the sack's frayed hem. I didn't lie, she whispers, her voice raw but steady. He attacked me. I fought to live. Flint's grip falters. His eyes search hers, and in them he sees the woman who saved him in the snow, not a killer. Gideon laughs, a bitter sound, and lunges for his pistol. Flint drives the knife down, not to kill but to disarm, the blade pinning Gideon's sleeve to the floorboards. Enough, Flint growls, binding Gideon's wrists with the same twine that once bound My Lin. Days later, the outpost buzzes with whispers. A woman named Martha, a cook from My Lin's past, steps forward. Her voice trembles but remains clear. She swears to My Lin's innocence before Sheriff Thompson. She fought for her life, Martha says, her words cutting through years of lies. The warrant is lifted, and the truth of My Lin's past unravels. She stands by the homestead, the sack now a folded cloth in her hands. It has been transformed, thrummed with the purple of wildflowers and a single pine sprig she stitched herself. Flint watches her, his chest tight. The vow to his wife is fading like a shadow under the rising dawn. He steps closer, his hand brushing hers, warm and steady, no longer forbidden. My Lin's lips part as a soft smile breaks through. Her scar catches the light, no longer a mark of shame but a mark of survival. They wed under a pine canopy, her dress simple. Her veil is the burlap, reborn, stitched with the work of her own hand. The river hums its song, and the forest is soft with the scent of spring. They plant a small pine by the homestead, its roots a promise of new beginnings. As the sun dips below the horizon, My Lin's hand rests in Flint's, her fingers tracing his calluses. Their scars are entwined. The path ahead still stretches through shadows, but together they walk it, redeemed.